When it comes to budgeting your money, everyone has a different way to go about things, but one popular rule that provides a general idea for those that are new is called the 50-30-20 rule. Now, whether you think that you're in the right direction or not, one stat that I have to mention is that the US Senate came to find that over 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. While you may be able to survive now, emergencies could come up at any time, high interest debt could lock you into a poor financial situation, and don't even mention your future retirement. But knowing that, with the 50-30-20 rule, it recommends that you should have 50% of your income go towards needs, 30% toward wants, and 20% towards savings. But many in the finance realm argue that this 50-30-20 rule is dead, or if it still even works in the year of 2026, and there are many more videos online on the debate of whether this rule really works or not. Now, of course, the rule isn't for everyone, but I'm about to go over in this video why most people actually underestimate how effective the 50-30-20 rule actually is for their finances. And so, knowing that, before we get started, my name is Sully. I run the company InvestLane, where our mission is to help others learn how to save and invest wisely to build lasting wealth. And all I ask is that if you do find value in this video, that you consider hitting the like, subscribe, and notifications button for future content like this. With that said, to get straight to it, the first part of this rule to go over is the needs that should take up at most 50% of your income. Now, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the median weekly earnings of the nation's 121 million full-time wage and salary workers was $1,235 in the first quarter of 2026. If you're curious, I'm also using the median earnings over the average because if we were to use the average, that would be skewed much more from the top 1% of the earners that are significant outliers. So knowing that, if we use $1,250 per week as an income, that creates $5,000 per month in pre-tax income that is equivalent to $60,000 per year. But to be more exact on this, rather than using the gross income, which is the number that's before taxes are applied, we're going to say that your monthly take-home income after factoring in federal income tax, Medicare tax, Social Security tax, and let's just say Michigan state income tax that's just over 4%, that leaves you with a take-home income of roughly $4,000 per month. That means that by using this 50-30-20 rule, your 50% towards needs recommends that you should spend at most $2,000 per month that is toward essential living expenses. Now, these essentials do not include things like going shopping for clothes, shoes, TV subscriptions, or on a flight for a vacation. They are strictly what is meant for what you need to live safely and comfortably under a roof. So a simple example of what you may see here would be if you paid rent of $1,000 per month, utilities and internet expenses that may end up being $200 per month, groceries, let's just say, end up being $400, and transportation costs at another $400 per month. That includes the cost for a vehicle, gas, insurance, or any other form of transportation that you would need to pay for. Like I said, everyone's situation is going to be different, and you may have a lower rent payment, but you may also have other costs like childcare that's crucial to properly budget for. But knowing that about this rule, let's now go over the second category, that is the wants, that is recommended to stay under 30% of your budget. Now, for this being the second category, the nice part is that 30% of your income is recommended for you to enjoy the things that you actually want to do. Ideas here include traveling, dining out, hobbies, entertainment, or shopping for non-essential needs like clothes or brand new shoes, or any other items that may fulfill what you consider the fun category of experiencing life. And so, based on the previous example of the median US income earner that brings in $4,000 after tax take-home pay every month, this means that it is recommended to spend at most $1,200 per month on wants. Now, that amount may sound like a lot for some, and you may rather try and save that money for something else, but the truth is that the cost here could easily add up quickly. For example, if you dine out or take part in any social activities with others, you may end up easily spending $50 a week, which is $200 per month right there. You also may have ongoing subscriptions like Netflix, Apple Music, Apple TV, YouTube TV, Disney Plus, you name it. There's so many options that you could choose from, and let's just say that you end up spending $100 per month there. Let's also say that you have a hobby of either going to the gym, playing in a sports league, or other activities like fishing or going to concerts, and after a month, you may easily end up spending $200 there. And if you ever decide to travel, especially if you go on a flight, while that may not be that frequent for many of you, whatever vacations you decide to take on in the future, let's just say on average that ends up costing you $300 per month. Not to mention, but you may easily end up spending on non non-essential things that you may want, like the cool clothes, shoes, video games, any sort of gaming electronics, sports equipment, even birthday gifts or donations that could easily make this category add up to $300 per month as well. And so to add on that, because you can easily spend a lot of money, let's just say the last category is miscellaneous expenses that you suddenly may come up to and want to do, like going to a coffee shop, getting an evening ice cream, or going to the movies. So we'll just say that's the last $100 that you'd spend to finish the $1,200 in monthly wants. Of course, there are many ways that you could go about spending on the wants. The most important thing, honestly, that I'd say here is to just really think about what wants are really that important to you or that you'd like to have. Because whatever's not that important to you, at least right now, you may as well with the rest try to save and invest that for something that's more important for you down the road. But before we move on, I'd like to thank FSA Store for sponsoring this video. One thing I've realized is that a lot of people end up losing FSA funds every year simply because they forget to use them before they expire, or they aren't sure what actually qualifies. If you haven't heard of them, FSA Store is the largest online marketplace for FSA eligible products, and everything on the site is already eligible for flexible spending accounts. So instead of trying to figure out what qualifies or dealing with reimbursement headaches, you can simply shop and use your FSA card directly at their checkout. What I like is how simple it makes the entire process. Their site makes it super easy to use your FSA card and helps ensure that you're getting the most value from your FSA funds. I've also found the platform very easy to use and navigate, especially when filtering through what different brands offer. And FSA Store also sent me some nice products to check out, like this Elta MD face sunscreen that I try to use every day, especially when I know that I'm going to be out in the sun for a while. And then they also sent me these Cure electrolyte drink mix pouches that I really wanted to try out for hydration, especially around the times that I work out. And so with that, on their site, you can find everyday health essentials like sunscreen, skincare products, allergy relief, pain support, and recovery tools all in one place, and everything is FSA eligible. If you have an FSA, it's one of the easiest ways to make sure that you're actually putting those funds to use instead of letting them go to waste. So if you'd like to check it out, go to FSAstore.com/DannySully, which I'll also have linked below, or you can scan the QR code that I'm going to have on the screen to start shopping now. Thanks to FSA Store, where everything's eligible, for sponsoring this video. And so while speaking of that, that leads me into the last category of the three, that is savings, which is recommended to be 20%. All right, so if you'd like to check it out, go to FSAstore.com/DannySully, which I'll also have linked below, or you can scan the QR code that I'm going to have on the screen to start shopping now. Thanks to FSA Store, where everything's eligible, for sponsoring this video. Now, unlike the want category that is spending money on things today that you really want, this category is all about benefiting your future self. For example, you may decide to contribute $400 per month toward retirement investing with accounts like a 401k or Roth IRA. You may put $100 per month toward building an emergency fund, and then $300 a month toward paying off student loans or any other high interest debt faster. Of course, your own allocation may look completely different because some individuals may already have a fully funded emergency fund and no debt, and would rather put any extra savings toward a normal taxable brokerage account, where the goal there could be to grow your funds in the next 5 to 10 years, where you can then actually use that for certain goals that you want. Now, while I'm on this topic, I have to emphasize the importance of having an emergency fund in place, and I personally use a high yield savings account for that because it's super easy to manage. I personally use SoFi's. They also offer a really nice welcome bonus, and I'll have a direct link in the description below for you if you want to check that out, or even our entire review page from InvestLane that covers top high yield savings accounts and brokerage accounts that you may be interested to get started with. But aside from that, just realize the importance of prioritizing things like paying off high interest debt, say credit card debt, before heavily investing into the stock market. And if you're trying to save for a home or any other major financial goals, this is also where the dollars that you decide to choose where they go is really important to try and balance out exactly what is the best approach to wisely decide on. But knowing that, the important takeaway here is that this category isn't just about putting your money into a savings account and letting it sit, or having cash under your bed doing nothing. It's about intentionally using that 20% to improve your financial future, whether that's investing for retirement, becoming debt-free, or preparing for major expenses that you know could be coming in the future. Now, for those that have the goal of something like buying a home, For many, you have to intentionally set aside money on a recurring basis in order to actually achieve that goal. Or for those that want to be completely debt-free, especially with like really high interest debt like credit card debt, you're likely going to want to prioritize that over many other areas. So while it may not sound exciting as spending money on a vacation or new gadgets and items today, this is the category that has the greatest potential to build long-term wealth for yourself and give you financial freedom that you could reap from down the road. Alright, but now that you know the main idea on how this rule works, let's now go over why I believe most people underestimate this rule. So I now want to go over why it works for most people. Now, of the reasons that the 50-30-20 rule works for most people, the first is that it keeps things super simple. For example, if you are one with a steady income and know what type of paycheck and the income that you're likely to get every 2 weeks, the ability to easily determine that half of that should go toward essential needs and about a third toward wants and a fifth towards savings, by just a few minutes with a piece of paper and a pencil or a spreadsheet online, you can easily and quickly get a much better feeling for your finances. After doing that, you may realize that you aren't even saving money for your retirement, debt may be taking up much more of your expenses than you actually thought, or the wants category may be making up more than half of your income. If that's the case, it's likely the reason that you're struggling to pay off debt or the ability to eventually buy a home. For many, without any simple guidelines or understanding to your own budget, you may easily be spending much more on your lifestyle now, living paycheck to paycheck. And like I said at the beginning of this video, it's not just coming from me. Many financial media outlets like Investopedia stated in an article that 67% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. The US Senate reported that over 60% of Americans are also living paycheck to paycheck. And Yahoo Finance states that it is more than half of Americans that live paycheck to paycheck. Now, after learning that, many people may think that they need a complex spreadsheet to budget properly every single purchase or numerous budgeting apps to track all sorts of financial data. But the truth is that that can end up taking a ton of time and energy, and unless you truly enjoy doing it yourself, keeping your finances simple with a general guideline like this, at least to start, can definitely provide a quality balance on your finances and put you in the right direction for your future. Which, of course, the way that you go about this is entirely up to you, and you may end up preferring 60% toward needs, 20% wants, and 20% savings. It really depends on your situation. Where, on the other hand, you may be very cautious with your spending, and you may want to try to save more by going 50% toward needs, 20% wants, and then 30% towards savings. But the biggest reason of all why this works for most people and why I actually believe that many underestimate it is that if you are able to save 20% towards savings and investments and you get that debt paid off, for most people, that will put you on a solid track to reach a successful retirement. So looking back at the example of taking home $4,000 per month after tax using the 50-30-20 rule, that is $2,000 towards needs, $1,200 towards wants, and $800 towards savings and investing. But here's where most people underestimate this rule entirely, because many think that due to inflation and the amount towards savings that you're unlikely to have enough to reach a secure retirement. The crazy thing here is that if you use accounts like a 401k, where your employer may even give you a match on your contributions, or a Roth IRA that you can control completely on your own, both offer great tax advantages. And if you were able to put away $400 per month from the example that I mentioned, a key stat to realize here is that if you were able to put that into the simple broad US stock market benchmark, that is the S&P 500, since 1957, the S&P 500 has delivered an average annual return of 10.51%. So let's say that you start at age 22 and do this for 40 years until you're at the age of 62. By averaging that return, you would end up having just over $2.5 million. But the biggest thing to realize here is that your $400 monthly contributions in 10, 20, 30, and even 40 years. Due to inflation, that is very likely to be much less than what you're going to be able to contribute in the future because of that inflation and the fact that income rises over time along with it. So realizing the impact of inflation is super important to understand as you forecast your potential future. Looking back at that article, when adjusted for inflation, the real return drops to 6.64% per year. And so looking back at that data, if you factor in that 6.64%, which is adjusted for inflation, that means your end balance would be equivalent to roughly $900,000 in today's economy. But for those that are in their 60s, that may very well be enough for many to successfully retire and have the funds last the rest of their life, especially factoring in a potential pension, Social Security, maybe a rental income that they have. And don't even forget other areas like you may have your entire home's mortgage paid off. And that is just a few factors factors that vary based on your situation that could impact how much this helps. But above all, from this example, this means that if you have the ability to invest at least a few $100s every month and you stay consistent while aligning your budget to best suit your needs and financial goals, for most, based on the data, using a median income earner that's in the US, you are very likely to have a secure retirement. Remember, it entirely depends on your situation, but the most important lesson to take away from this is that every financial goal you have requires discipline and staying consistent, and having something like this simple guideline as a generic rule to at least be aware of is crucial for your finances now and for your future. Now, I have to say to thank you all for watching this video. If you are interested to learn more about savings with things like an emergency fund, I've created an entire free savings account master sheet. Or if you'd rather start your investing journey and see top investments to consider, I'll also have our free index fund cheat sheet linked in the description below. Which, while you're at it, if you want to get started with a new high yield savings account or investing platform, I'll have direct links below to some of the top options that you could get started with. And please know, at the end of the day, I want you to do what's best for your finances, but do know that depending on the ones you choose to get started with, I may earn a commission for it, which is greatly appreciated. And as always, don't forget to hit the like, subscribe, and notifications button for future content like this.